This section of the course is an introduction to the Web IEP Page B. This page involves looking at the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. There are two versions of this page, one for ages 3 through 12, and a second version for students aged 13 to 21. The sections of the Page B are intended to engage parents and students in the IEP process, establish a context for discussion by the IEP team, establish a foundation for decision-making, setting priorities for goals and activities, and establishing a foundation for specially designed instruction. It also addresses the students' involvement in progress in the Iowa Core curriculum and functional implications. This page is completed as a team during the IEP meeting before proceeding to the discussion of the rest of the IEP. When possible, we have included screenshots taken from the Web IEP to help illustrate and explain the information. Our learning target for this session is to introduce you to the basic principles for this page and the information you're required to enter. As you click on the B page, there are two tabs at the top, Consider and Assess. The first section in the Consider is Special Considerations. In this section, the team is identifying specific areas that bear consideration and potential action as a result of the IEP. The IEP team needs to respond to each area of consideration. The IEP team checks yes for any areas of consideration that will be addressed in the IEP. Checking the box yes could result in information being documented under Other Information Essential for the development of the IEP, Effects of Disability, Course of Study, Goals, Services, and Supports, or other sections of the IEP. If the area considered is not a concern, you simply check no. For behavior, communication, and health concerns, you may also indicate that an additional plan will be developed and attached to the IEP. If the student's behavior is of some concern, but classroom or program-wide positive behavior intervention supports are having a beneficial effect and individualized supports are not necessary, the team could check the top option and note relevant information in the Other Information section of the IEP. If the behavior is a significant concern and the team believes it must be addressed in the IEP through inclusion in goals and/or services, activities, or supports, the team would also check the top box. If the team believes a functional behavioral assessment and/or behavior intervention plan are required to address student needs, or an FBA and BIP are required due to disciplinary action, the team would indicate this by checking the middle box. In some circumstances, the team may need to check both of these options in order to appropriately address the student's needs. If communication needs are a known concern, or the student is deaf or hard of hearing, and the impairment adversely affects his or her learning, the team would indicate this as an area of concern to be addressed in the IEP. If the student is deaf or hard of hearing and the impairment adversely affects their learning and a communication plan needs to be developed, the IEP team would select the middle box in this section. The bottom box will be checked when this area is not of concern. In this section, you would select the top box when the existence of health concerns interferes with student access to educational environments or adversely impacts their educational performance. You would also include information about the specific concerns elsewhere in the IEP, such as in Other Information, Effective Disability, Course of Study, Goals or Services, and Supports. If a student requires a specific action in the school setting, you would indicate this by selecting the middle box, and an additional health plan would be generated as part of the student's health records. Typically, this would involve the participation of a district or building health office staff member. These three considerations are also discussed at an IEP meeting. You would indicate that limited English proficiency is a concern addressed in the IEP when the student's first language is not English and the student has not acquired academic proficiency relative to grade or age level standards in English. If a student's vision is impaired, to the extent that even with correction, the vision limits educational performance and Braille instruction is needed. If a student cannot complete or participate in daily educational tasks or activities because of the disability, and assistive technology is needed to ensure their participation and access, you would select the yes box under Assistive Technology. If the Assistive Technology box is checked yes, then the services that are needed should be documented on the F page. AIM refers to Accessible Instructional Materials. teams may be more familiar with the terminology NIMAS eligible. NIMAS eligibility refers to the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standards, which is part of the 2006 reauthorization of IDEA 2004. NIMAS qualifications include students who are blind, visually impaired, where lens correction prevents the reading of standard printed material, unable to read or use standard printed material as a result of physical limitations, or certified by a competent medical authority. For specific information, you can click on the question mark located next to this statement on page B of the Web IEP. If you click Yes, you will need to add accessible instructional materials to the F-Page Activities tab and indicate the services needed. This section requires information about the student. Strengths are those things the student is good at, which may or may not include academic skills. Interests include the things, events, or people that the student shows curiosity about. Preferences are things, events, or people that the student chooses over others. They could pertain to, but are not limited to, the needs of the student in the school setting. The IEP team is required to consider the strengths of an eligible student. Documenting their interests and preferences assists in planning the student's individual needs. Notice the blue bank button. Because this information is specific to each student, you might want to save a generic statement that prompts you to gather this information during the meeting. Here's an example of strengths, interests, and preferences for a student. The IEP team is required to consider the concerns of the parents for enhancing the education of their child. This is not a time to set goals or define services, activities, or supports. Often these are more general statements such as, we would like to see improvements in her reading skills. For preschool-age children, a parent may express concerns about kindergarten readiness. Consideration of the parents' concerns for enhancing their child's education is a required component of the IEP, and the IEP team needs to make sure that parents' concerns are addressed as the IEP is developed. Do not leave this section blank. Other information essential for the development of this IEP. Here you document information that establishes the need for activities and supports that are not related directly to a goal on the IEP. This is information the team believes is useful to an understanding of the eligible individual's current status and needs, or may require future action throughout the IEP. For example, Braden is ambulatory but walks and goes up and down stairs very slowly. This information establishes the need for an accommodation. A service activity or support listed on page F would be, Braden is allowed 6 minutes to make class changes without being considered tardy. It is not necessary to repeat information that is documented in the transition section of the IEP. For a preschool-age child, you could document their attendance at a regular preschool program that is not part of their IEP program. A preschool child's attendance in all early childhood settings is used to determine the early childhood setting code. For students aged 13 through 21, there are 2 additional sections for the B page. In this section, you will make a general statement regarding the impact of the individual's disability on curriculum involvement and lay the groundwork for goals that will be written. For preschool-age children, you would include involvement in appropriate activities. The team must include information that describes the functional implications of the effect of the student's disability. Include both in-school and out-of-school implications. The next few slides are used only for children 13 or older and include information about transition IEPs. For each post-secondary area of living, learning, and working, document information sources and results of transition assessments. The results must include data or skills information that are sufficient to demonstrate that the area has been assessed and to determine if there is a need for services, supports, or activities. Transition assessments are broadly defined and may include review of school records and classroom data, interview of the student, caregivers, parents, or employers, observations, questionnaires, informal assessments, or published assessments. The AEA Special Education Documentation Guide, often referred to as the Red Book, provides specific information that may be of assistance in completing these sections. Living information sources can include parent and student interviews, school and community-based observations, school records, such as classroom data, adaptive skills inventories, or other informal or published assessments. Living results. Results must include data or skills information sufficient to demonstrate the post-secondary area has been assessed with information to determine there is a need for services, supports, or activities. Transition planning, learning. Learning information sources include school records, teacher and student interviews, Iowa tests of educational development, and classroom data. Learning results must include sufficient data to demonstrate that the area has been assessed in order to determine if a need for any services, supports, or activities. Transition planning, working. Again, the team must document information sources and results of transition assessments in the area of working. These sources must reflect gathering of information sufficient to demonstrate that the area has been assessed and to determine if there is a need for services, supports, or activities to be included in the IEP. Data sources may include review of school records and classroom data, interviews of the student, caregiver, parents, or employers, observations, questionnaires, and informal or published assessments. Results must include data or skills information to support the services, supports, or activities included in the IEP. The post-secondary expectations describe what the student will pursue after graduation from high school in the areas of living, learning, and working. These must be based on assessment information, including student and family preferences, gathered and represent what the IEP team will use to plan goals, services, activities, and supports. They should be written in terms that are observable and state the actual result, not the process of doing it. For example, will work at rather than will apply for jobs. Post-secondary expectations must project beyond high school, include an anticipated result in each of the areas of living, learning, and work, be written as observable behaviors, become more specific as the student approaches his or her post-secondary transition, and be the foundation for the course of study, goals, and the services, activities, and supports documented in the IEP. Post-secondary expectation. Use this box to indicate if the needs identified during the transition assessment will be addressed through the provision of services, supports, or supplementary aids to complete goals or activities for the duration of the IEP being developed. Keep in mind that transition is a multi-year process. It is possible that some needs identified through the transition assessment will not result in services, supports, or supplementary aids in the coming year. If the IEP indicates that no supports or services are needed in a post-secondary area for the coming year, then one of two things must also be present. Either the assessment information on the present level must be sufficient to determine that no needs exist in that post-secondary area, or the course of study should indicate that the need will be addressed in a future year. An area of need might be addressed in the course of study by specifying courses or activities that will occur at some point in the future, but those needs might not be addressed through goals, services, or activities in the IEP being written. Course of study. Graduation requirements need to be stated in a way that makes the intent very clear. Use specific language such as 48 credits are required for graduation, or Terrence will work towards satisfactory completion of his self-determination goal as stated in the IEP, and he must complete all vocational experiences in his course of study. Current status. Clearly and specifically state the student's current status in relationship to the stated graduation requirements. For example, Trinity has 18.5 credits at the completion of the fall semester. Or, Terrence is projected to complete his self-determination goal by the end of the next semester. He has completed 50% of the vocational experiences in his course of study. Target graduation date. Document the anticipated month and year of graduation. This date represents the IEP team's best guess at the time the IEP is being written and may be changed if necessary in the future. Courses and activities needed. Document the courses and activities needed to pursue the post-secondary expectations and graduate by the projected date. The team may include specific courses needed, community-based experiences, or other activities needed to assist in the transfer of functional performance of academic, working, and living skills to real-world situations. You have completed the unit for page B. Please go back to IEP 101 and continue with the next module at your convenience.